Perhaps no other state is more closely entwined with the destiny of a young America. A land of ancient forests and mighty rivers that forged a turbulent path to the west. Arkansas, the natural state, where a cultural gumbo of Americans settled amid pristine lakes and wild mountains. A land of sultry song and gospel music, of desperados and hanging judges. Scene of the landmark battle for school desegregation, and home to a modern-day president. Arkansas, a bridge from America's past to her present. To see it by air is a spectacular journey down the mighty Mississippi, the old man river of song, flowing past fertile fields of cotton and up into the shadows of backwoods hollows. Aerial Arkansas is a journey through America's wild interior, where a young country began its destiny to explore the West and become one of the greatest nations on earth. The Mississippi River defines Arkansas's eastern border, just as sharply as it shaped much of the state's and the nation's history. This is the legendary Old Man River, immortalized in song by Oscar Hammerstein in the musical Showboat. The river of brawling boatmen and riverboat gamblers. Here, the good times roll along the river, the home of the Delta Blues. Nestled between a ridge and the Mississippi River lies the port town of Helena, founded in 1833. At the turn of the 20th century, this graceful town captured the imagination of Mark Twain during his travels along the Mississippi. He described it as a town with one of the prettiest situations along the river. The Pillow House, home to 5 generations of the Pillow family, is one of the few remaining traces of the town Twain found so appealing. Distinguished by its turrets and towers, it's one of the finest remaining examples of Queen Anne architecture in the South. Built in 1896, it was designed by George Barber, one of the most popular architects of the Victorian era. In the 1950s, blacks from the Deep South came to Helena seeking work and brought the sultry sound of the blues with them. But further south, the oxbow bends of the Mississippi and its tributaries, the U-shaped patterns etching their ever-changing course, are evidence of the river's darker side, floods. The Great Flood of 1927 was the most destructive in Arkansas history. 6,600 square miles of Arkansas, including all this land, was once swamped underwater up to 30 feet deep. The devastation and political fallout was so great that it changed the way the nation viewed natural disasters, echoing Hurricane Katrina. It was after the catastrophic flood of 1927 that people began to look to the federal government for help after natural disasters. Outside the hum of the cities, the Mississippi is wild, almost primeval. Over the millennia, the river has cut many trails across the land. Artifacts reveal that Native Americans once lived along the river's ancient paths, some 13,000 years ago. The most tangible vestige of early Indian culture lies here in Toltec State Park. These are just two of a mysterious series of 18 platform mounds, of which only 5 are still visible. Built in 650 by Indians known as the Plum Bayou people, the mounds are in perfect alignment with the fall and spring equinoxes. It's thought they were used as some type of measuring system. But the greatest mystery of the mounds may be why, after 4 centuries, they were suddenly abandoned. In 1050, the Plum Bayou people simply disappeared, leaving no clues as to why they left or where they went. Before the arrival of European explorers in the 16th century, over 70,000 Native Americans thrived in settlements throughout Arkansas. It was in 1541, near the junction of the Mississippi and the Arkansas River, that Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto made his legendary first encounter with the Indians. As the story goes, an Indian leader the Spanish named Aquitso arrived to meet de Soto and his army with a fleet of 200 canoes. Alarmed at the size of the native force, the Spaniards fired their crossbows and killed 5 or 6 Indians. It was an ominous beginning, with terrible consequences to come. De Soto's army spent the next 2 years exploring Arkansas, leaving terrible destruction in its wake. In just 2 years, Spanish weapons and diseases wiped out 90% of the Indian population. An apocalypse from which they never fully recovered. By the time the first pioneers arrived in Arkansas, they found a land rich in game and promise. With little competition for land, its native people were all but gone. King cotton, the crop that shaped the South, no longer rules Arkansas's Mississippi Valley. Today, it's the rice fields, weaving artistic trails through the earth that dominate the landscape. The cotton fields are still there, but it's the latticed terraces of rice, or rice levees, as they're known in Arkansas, that cover the valley. The levees are curved to follow the natural contour and elevation of the land. The curve controls the flow of water through the fields. Today, Arkansas is the leading rice-producing state in the country. But from the air, the curving fields resemble modern art more than crops. Somewhere under this vast canopy of trees is a simple stone marker. Although easily overlooked, it marks one of the most pivotal events in U.S. history: the Louisiana Purchase. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson made one of the best deals of all time when he bought the vast Louisiana Territory from Napoleon Bonaparte of France. It sold for the bargain price of $15 million. Inside this swampland is the spot where surveyors began the monumental task of mapping the entire Louisiana Territory. A vast wilderness that stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada. Napoleon's comment on the sale proved prophetic. He said, "This forever affirms the power of the United States. I have given England a maritime rival who sooner or later will humble her pride." The new lands doubled the size of the fledgling nation and helped shape its destiny. Moving west to central Arkansas is the birthplace of Johnny Cash. In the lyrics to Arkansas Loving Man, Cash tells the story of his family's move to Arkansas when he was 3. In search of a better life, the family followed his father, Ray, a farmer, hobo, and odd-job laborer, and landed in Dyess. Here, Johnny flourished, working in the fields by day, listening to blues and country stations on the radio at night. He began composing songs at the age of 12 and never stopped. Moving west into southwestern Arkansas is a journey over small towns with charming names like Star City, Smackover, and Delight. Just ahead is one of the strangest destinations in North America. It may look like a simple gray dirt field, but this is a billion-year-old diamond mine. The crater of Diamond State Park is a very real field of dreams. It's believed to be the only place on the planet where anyone can dig for diamonds with their own hands and keep any they find. It all started 95 million years ago when a crack in the Earth's crust created a volcanic pipe that brought diamonds to the surface. In 1906, a farmer discovered diamonds and ignited a mining rush. Since then, the fields have produced the most perfect diamond ever certified by the American Gem Society, and the largest diamond ever found in America, the Uncle Sam, weighing in at a whopping 40 carats. Following the path of the Red River southwest leads to another turbulent chapter in Arkansas history. In 1819, a bitter border dispute between Spain and the United States over the Red River nearly ended in war. For years, Arkansas's border was the international boundary between the United States and Spain, much of it defined by the Red River. Both the United States and Spain claimed the land north of the river. Spain's refusal to give up its claim effectively stopped President Thomas Jefferson's southern exploration of the Louisiana Purchase. Thus, all the glory went to those who led the northern exploration, the famous Lewis and Clark. Today, Route 30 crosses the heart of Arkansas's coastal plain. Following an ancient Indian path known as the Southwest Trail, above the trail are the rugged rocky forests of the highlands. Flat, fertile plains lie below. The oldest part of the trail follows the eastern edge of the Ozark and Ouachita Mountains, skirting hills, swamps, and rivers. Here lies the small historic town of Washington, where orderly rows of white picket fences belie the town's colorful past. Here, Davy Crockett told tales at the tavern. Sam Houston planned the Texas Revolution, and the Bowie knife was created. In the early 19th century, every frontiersman carried a long knife for skinning game and for self-defense. So when knife fighter James Bowie needed a new knife, he went to James Black, the best blacksmith in town. When Bowie was attacked by 3 well-armed desperados, he drew his new knife, killing all 3 and decapitating 2 of them. Newspapers across the country published all the lurid details, and Black's Bowie knife became famous, although locally it's known as an Arkansas toothpick. Just miles east of Washington are 2 humble but notable towns that shaped the early lives of a poet and a president. For most of the 20th century, watermelon farms dotted the land around the little town of Hope. But Hurricane Katrina changed all that. Today, the landscape is swallowed by a sea of trailers. 20,000 mobile homes, meant to provide temporary housing for flood victims as far away as New Orleans. Many of them were never used. But Hope's permanent claim to fame is its status as the birthplace of President Bill Clinton. In this house on Hervey Street, William Jefferson Clinton lived the first 4 years of his life at his grandparents' home. His mother, Virginia Cassidy Blythe, went to live with him after the death of her husband, William Jefferson Blythe III, while she was still expecting their only child. From this dusty little town of just 5,000, where he won the local Most Beautiful Baby competition, Bill Clinton went on to become Arkansas's youngest governor at the age of 32. Then rose to lead his nation as the 42nd President of the United States. Just 20 miles away from Hope is the rural town of Stamps, the childhood home of poet Maya Angelou. In her autobiography, Angelou writes of her train journey from California to Stamps in the 1930s. She was just 3 years old, traveling in the care of her 4-year-old brother. Once they reached the segregated South, things looked up. Angelou wrote, "As Negro passengers, who always traveled with loaded lunchboxes, felt sorry for the poor little motherless darlings, and plied us with cold fried chicken and potato salad." Looking back on the journey, Angelou realized she had been part of a cross-country migration of thousands of frightened black children traveling alone to their newly affluent parents in northern cities, or back to grandmothers in southern towns when the North reneged on its economic promise. Angelou says it was here, in Stamps, that she first encountered Southern bigotry, and here that her faith and activism began. In the heart of the Ouachita Mountains, surrounded by miles of pine, oak, and hickory forest, lies the town of Hot Springs. What looks like a common southern town is a truly special place, where underground springs form a kind of magical pulse. Here, hot water springs to the surface from a fault deep in the Earth's crust, a phenomenon that gave the town its name. It's a place of stunning natural beauty and a somewhat shady past. For centuries, this misty valley was revered by Native Americans. They were the first to bathe in the geothermal springs and considered it hallowed ground. By the mid-18th century, the fledgling village was known as Thermopolis. Today, the spring waters are piped into the elegant spas that make up Bathhouse Row. The bathhouses were built in the late 1800s when hot springs began to attract the nation's rich and famous. They bathed at the Buckstaff, Lamar, and Fordyce bathhouses. They played the ponies at the Oaklawn racetrack and gambled at the casinos. By the 1930s, Hot Springs had played host to every notable mobster in the nation. Al Capone kept a suite year-round here in the luxurious Arlington Hotel, and allegedly exported Hot Springs moonshine to his Chicago night spots. And Hot Springs has a modern claim to fame in the form of its favorite son, Bill Clinton, who went to school in the town. Today, Hot Springs also attracts visitors to 3 spectacular lakes in the area. Here, high-priced waterfront homes share hundreds of miles of shoreline with state parks, hiking trails, and pristine forest. Just before Bill Clinton entered Hot Springs High School, some of the darkest days in Arkansas history were about to take place in the state capital, Little Rock. In 1957, Little Rock High School became an international symbol of America's violent resistance to desegregation. In defiance of a Supreme Court decision ordering the desegregation of America's public schools, the governor of Arkansas called out the National Guard to prevent 9 African-American students from entering Little Rock High School. Turned back to the street, the students faced a throng of jeering, threatening whites. It would take an order from the President of the United States and the U.S. Army to enforce the law of the land in Arkansas. Today, Little Rock High School, now known as Central High School, is fully integrated, 54% black and 43% white. Along the Little Rock skyline, a familiar building seems out of place. The city has the only replica of the U.S. Capitol building in the United States. It's used as the Arkansas Capitol building. Long before Little Rock became capital of the state of Arkansas, it started out as a riverfront town, prospering with the growth of traffic along the Arkansas River in the 1800s. Businesses grew up along the waterfront, but so did brothels, saloons, and gambling joints. Soon some areas had earned the names Fighting Alley and Hell's Half Acre. Today, the River Market area still bustles, in part due to the construction of the Clinton Presidential Library. The library sits in a 30-acre park, which replaces an industrial site of old warehouses and vacant space. It represents President Clinton's bridge to the 21st century, symbolizing openness and accessibility. But at $160 million, critics complain about the size and enormous cost of the monument to Clinton. Northwest of Little Rock loom the mountains of the million-acre Ozark National Forest, a sea of lush green plateaus, riddled with faults, cracks, and rivers. Here, man and nature meet in splendid isolation. The sheer slopes of the Boston Mountains drop down to the Buffalo National River and a protected wilderness of 36,000 acres of rugged high country. No mechanized vehicles are allowed. The land is only accessible by foot, horseback, or canoe. And when fog and mist descend upon the river, the waters take on an air of mystery. The Buffalo River was the first river ever to be designated as a national river by an act of Congress in 1972. As such, it is protected from dams and obstructions that would disrupt the character of the river and the natural land and life that flourish here. The deeper runs of the Buffalo are bounded by forests of oak and hickory. The lower wilderness area is rugged high country, full of hollows and streams. Here, the Buffalo flows down to meet the White River, just south of Bull Shoals Lake. They meet in a 45,000-acre fishing mecca, known for rainbow and brown trout, catfish, and bream. Deep in the Ozark Mountains lie what was once the town of Marble Falls' biggest attractions. In 1968, Dogpatch USA opened here, a theme park based on the characters and locations in Al Cap's popular Lil Abner comic strip. At the time, hillbilly culture was in its heyday. The Beverly Hillbillies drew big TV audiences, and the Lil Abner comic strip ran in over 700 newspapers. But after just a few years, the park fell on hard times. A victim of a troubled economy and the demise of the Lil Abner comic strip. Today, the defunct park holds hardly a trace of the town where Daisy May pined for Lil Abner. After the park closed in 1993, the town, which had changed its name to Dogpatch to promote the park, changed it back to Marble Falls. High in the Ozarks, built into the sides of two mountains, sits the village of Eureka Springs. The town's good fortunes began in the late 1800s when the healing waters of the Ozarks attracted the well-to-do from across the country who came seeking cures for their ailments. They stayed at the luxurious Crescent Hotel and Spa, built in 1886. In the 1930s, the Crescent fell on hard times and was bought by a charlatan who turned it into a hospital where he sold phony cancer cures to desperate patients. But the fraud was exposed, and today, the Crescent once again hosts guests in style. Perched between the mountains, Eureka Springs is crossed by a maze of switchback roads and stairways. Even its historic downtown moves at the pace of another age. It doesn't have a single traffic light. One of the more controversial sites at Eureka Springs, and one of the hardest to miss, is the mountaintop statue of the Christ of the Ozarks. Built in 1966, the white mortar statue of Jesus Christ stands 7 stories high, with a 15-foot-long face. The arms span 65 feet from fingertip to fingertip and suggest the crucifixion. Built completely by hand, the 2 million-pound statue is anchored in a steel and concrete foundation. It was constructed to withstand winds of 500 miles an hour and has a 2-foot rectangle in the top of the head for pressure equalization in case of a passing tornado. On a clear day, it's visible from 20 miles away. The statue was built by the wife of Gerald Smith, an anti-Semitic minister of the 1930s. Today, it serves as the Smiths' gravesite, as well as a stage for theatrical passion plays and a Bible museum. The statue has become a source of controversy in and outside of Eureka Springs. Nonetheless, Christ of the Ozarks appears here to stay. Due west of Eureka Springs, convoys of semi-tractor trailers flow out of the small but very prosperous town of Bentonville. It's home to the biggest retailer in the world, Walmart. Despite its humble headquarters, Walmart is the largest private employer in the world and the world's largest public corporation, with revenues of $387 billion a year. In downtown Bentonville is Walton's original 5 and 10 cent store, now almost lost amongst its larger neighbors. But Sam Walton had the last laugh. He went on to become the richest man in America. While Sam has passed on, folks still talk about the friendly, down-to-earth mogul who would stop his pickup to chat with just about anyone. Evidence, they say, that nice folks can finish first. Moving south through the West Ozarks was a treacherous journey in the 1800s. Before the famous Butterfield Run stagecoach line started up, the roads were so poor that oxen were the only transport. Horses lacked the stamina, and mules were still scarce in the area. Today, the city of Fayetteville, which was born along a stagecoach line, is the third most populous in the state. It ranks 8th on Forbes magazine's top 10 best places in America for business and careers. But Fayetteville's most dramatic history is a saga of the changing fortunes of war. During the Civil War, its strategic location as a crossroads in northeastern Arkansas made it a prize for both the Union and Confederate armies. And the town survived a dizzying number of occupations by both sides. Two bloody battles stand out in the struggle for the city. The Battle of Pea Ridge took place here in March 1862. One of the 26,000 soldiers who fought on these fields was Union Army Private Vincent Holman. He described the carnage of the battle in his diary. "I am still in camp, waiting on the boys that is wounded. There is any amount of legs, arms, hands lying around. The doctors are taking off arms and legs and hands every day. I hope to God that I won't have to witness the same again." The Union Army prevailed in the end, defeating the Confederates at Elkhorn Tavern. This is a replica of the original building. Fayetteville had barely recovered from Pea Ridge when another major battle erupted at Prairie Grove on December 7th, 1862. The sides were evenly matched. The Confederate Army with 12,000 troops, the Union Army about 10,000. And both armies included troops from the Cherokee and Creek nations. The reason? An early federal government deal that split the Indian homelands. The Civil War exploited the conflict, with Cherokee fighting on both Union and Confederate sides. Both sides suffered staggering losses. In just one day of fighting, there were 2,700 casualties. It was likely the bloodiest in Arkansas's history. Today, Fayetteville is nationally known as the home of the University of Arkansas. When the University of Arkansas opened in 1871, it scandalized many state elders by admitting women. In 1948, it was also the first major Southern public university to admit an African-American student without litigation. Today, 18,000 students attend the school that began on a frontier farm. They're loyal fans of the school's football team, the Razorbacks, named for the wild razorback hogs native to the area. According to school lore, the team got the name in 1909 when the football coach told a crowd that the team had performed like a wild band of razorback hogs. Known for its ridged back and tenacious fighting, the razorback had long been associated with the backwoods of Arkansas. The students loved the comparison, and the wild hog became the official university mascot. The Western Ozarks, home to wild hogs, clashing armies, and some of the most notorious desperados on the American frontier. In the 1930s, the back roads of the Ozarks were prime escape routes for the outlaws Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow. Before there was an FBI, criminals could commit crimes and then race across the state border without fear of being chased by police. Tearing along the back roads in cars similar to this, the Barrow Gang, as they were known, moved in a circle skirting the edges of 5 states, fleeing into the Ozarks between the bank holdups and kidnappings that made them famous. The gang's most serious crime, murder, took place just north of the town of Alma on Highway 71. Here, the gang mortally wounded a state marshal in a shootout. Less than a year later, Bonnie and Clyde would die in a shootout as well. Fort Smith, also known as Bell Point for its site at the junction of the Arkansas and Pardo Rivers, began as a Western frontier military post in 1817. The present-day city of Fort Smith, on the border of Oklahoma, bears little resemblance to the Wild West town it once was in the 1800s, but traces of its turbulent past still stand. Overlooking the Arkansas River lie the remains of the very first Fort Smith, from which the town takes its name. Fort Smith began as an outpost on the western frontier. Justice was meted out harsh and swift. This is a replica of the famed gallows, where the infamous hanging Judge Isaac Parker sent over 80 men to die. The barracks hold the early frontier jail, known as Hell on the Border. It serves as a tribute to the federal marshals and deputies who rode for Judge Parker to tame the seemingly untamable Arkansas frontier. Another vestige of the city's colorful past is the Visitor Center, housed with grace and uncommon honesty in what was once Fort Smith's most elegant brothel, Miss Laura's. One of the few, if not the only, former bordello listed on the National Register of Historic Places. When the ambitious young Miss Laura opened her elegant Front Street bordello, her mansion housed the best girls in town and became Fort Smith's premier brothel. Many of the girls would marry and become matriarchs of respected old Arkansas families. While most prostitutes lived in truly appalling conditions, some historians argue that some of these women helped to civilize the wilderness far more than most accounts would ever record. Moving east, the barracks of historic Fort Chaffee appear. A key military training post from the early days of World War II. Today, the base is used mainly for National Guard training, and often to process thousands of hurricane refugees from New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. But for Elvis fans, Fort Chaffee will forever be known as the place in 1958 where Elvis Presley was inducted into the U.S. Army. Here in a local barbershop, Presley had his rock and roll locks shorn in favor of a military haircut. Because Fort Chaffee still retains its World War II look, today it's a favorite location for period Hollywood movies. Both Biloxi Blues and A Soldier's Story were filmed here. Heading further east, it's a short trip from World War II to the nuclear age. Just 8 miles. Here is Arkansas's only nuclear power plant, Nuclear One. Built on Lake Dardanelle in 1974, it's licensed to operate until 2034. Although the plant provides more than 1/4 of the state's electricity, it comes at a cost. Shortly after the terrorist attack on New York's Twin Towers, Arkansas's governor activated the National Guard to bolster security here after the plant's owner, the energy company, asked for help. Pushing east, the nuclear age gives way to a simpler time on the Arkansas River and some old-fashioned Arkansas humor. Where else could you ask for directions and be told the location is halfway between Pickles Gap and Toadsuck? They're both real place names, and the stories of how Toadsuck, an old keel boatman stop, got its name are legendary, all involving the copious consumption of moonshine. One story goes that boatmen would stop for a rest at an eddy in the river, pull out their jugs and suck up whiskey like toads, or have themselves a regular toad suck. Another story says that folks would gather by the river on a Saturday night to gamble and suck up whiskey until they swelled up like toads. Just a short way from Toadsuck, we make our last stop to visit the ancient past and view the Arkansas River from Pettyjohn Mountain. The mountain was once home to Native Americans who lived here over 1,000 years ago. They were nomads, living before the invention of the bow and arrow, hunting for game with spears. Yet the cave paintings they made, using minerals from nearby rocks, have lasted 1,000 years. Their passage recorded on the ancient stone of Arkansas. The legend of how Pettyjohn got its name is a romantic tale. As the story goes, in the 16th century, a young French girl disguised herself as a cabin boy in order to follow her beloved to the New World. Because of her small size, the sailors nicknamed her Petit Jean, French for Little John. On arriving in Arkansas, she revealed her true identity and was reunited with her beloved. But their happiness was short-lived, as Petit Jean died soon after and was buried atop the mountain now called Petit John. Arboreal, Arkansas. A stunning journey through time that tells the story of a rugged frontier filled with notorious desperados, tamed over time. A land of a great river, great battles, and great promise that gave birth to artists like Johnny Cash, Maya Angelou, and a president. Arkansas, nicknamed the Natural State, is still a land of wild rivers and vast wilderness where the wonders of nature abound.